Welcome to another episode of Distory. My name is Kirk from walruscarp.com, and tonight we are going to explore the wonderful enchanted wish that Snow White removes herself from a scary adventure and instead is enjoying the luxurious, wonderful life that still has a giant witch and a dungeon and skeletons. So, I mean, whatever. But with me, as always, is the well-researched, the amazing, talented author and Disney historian, Kate, the Disney Cicerone. Kate, how are we doing this evening?
I'm doing really good. I'm on location, on vacation with my family, so I'm in a little bit of a different place, but I'm enjoying hanging out at the beach with my family this week, and but still digging into some Disney history.
I'm mentally in a different place. Are we still doing this show? What are we doing? Oh, hey, whoa. True. All right, moving on.
We thought about going over to Walt Disney World to do that version of Scary Adventures, but then we're like, you know what? It makes more sense because it's fresh in our brain to just go from Disneyland's Snow White Scary Adventures to Snow White's Enchanted Wish, and so we can directly see the things that have changed. I think that makes the most sense for this series. So that's what we're doing on this episode, and digging into that. And there's actually quite a few interesting stories that I found from Snow White, some historical details. You say you have a couple rabbit holes, so it'll be a good one, I think.
I'm stoked. Let's do it.
Okay. So as always, I thought we'd start off just a little bit with the concept, like how did we get here? It's where we left off with Snow White Scary Adventures opened up in 1983 in Disneyland, replacing the original Snow White and Her Adventures from 1955. And this version was still pretty scary and still paid homage to the original. But at this point, like, how did we get to the Snow White and Snow White's Enchanted Wish version? Well, I have a couple of notes from Dave Caranci, who's the manager of creative development at Walt Disney Imagineering, who helped oversee this project. And so I'm going to kind of like integrate those as we go, because he has some really interesting insights into why they made it change. But this is the only Disney princess attraction in Disneyland Park. And so he's looking at it and asking, could they tell a better story? Because we talked about this last time, Kirk, how like the story didn't really end correctly as to the movie for Snow White's Scary Adventures. It kind of ends with like the witch rolling a boulder on top of you and then they lived happily ever after, which isn't exactly like the movie.
That's exactly like the movie. I watched the movie and that's what happened.
Yeah. So they asked if they could tell a better story and maybe be more true to the story of Snow White. And he said it really felt like it was lacking the charm that the movie had and that we as Disney could do better. And he always said he felt sad that there was a 2-hour wait for Peter Pan. And then like right across the way, there was a 10-minute wait for Snow White because it was so scary. And people just knew that it wasn't appealing to as many people because of what it was in that current iteration. So it was interesting that there was actually an intern that caused change for this attraction. So it wasn't even like a permanent resident of Imagineering that changed it. So he said, we had an intern at the time, David Borning, who had a passion for Snow White because it was coming up on its 80th anniversary of Snow White the movie. He went home and built a little model and then came back to the office and really sold us on the idea of what if we enhanced Snow White and we did some cool new things with it. That really got us thinking, and it got us legs very fast and became a project. And that's how Snow White's Enchanted Wish came to life. So, the idea of like adding some new special effects, using projection mapping, using kind of some new techniques, but still staying true to the original story and animation is really kind of like the concept of where they were going to go with this.
Dude, if there's anything that you can learn from this, is shoot your shot. Dude did the work. Now, here's the other thing. You don't just like show up and go, hey, can I make a model? You make the model. You make the model, you show it up, make it, do the work, and don't tell people you're going to do the work. Do the work, show up, and say, hey, what do you think? Worst case scenario, you get an opportunity somewhere else. And I'm excited because honestly, I said this, and this is a bold, bold statement because I know I love Alice in Wonderland. She's always number one. But Enchanted Wish, better than Peter Pan, better than Mr. Toads. I know. It's so well done.
I know.
It's beautiful. True. And I feel like after researching this, it really solidified my choice as being my second favorite Fantasyland attraction in Disneyland.
Yeah, and sadly, a lot of people still kind of overlook this one, maybe because they think it's just a princess ride, so it's silly or something, or they remember the old iteration, they don't want to try the new one, or they liked the old one and they don't want to try the new one. And I highly encourage people to go on this ride because what they did was fantastic in the way that they honored the original animation and the original techniques, which we'll see as we go through here.
It straight up blew me away the first time I wrote it. Because, like, you get a marriage, and this is kind of like a peek under the tent. You get a marriage of what they did for New Fantasyland in Walt Disney World by taking some elements from Seven Dwarfs Mine Train and integrating them into, and they were fantastic elements over there. Then you're adding in scent, then you're adding in projection mapping, and my goodness, it's a thrilling, all-over sensory experience, and it's just so well done.
Yeah. So here's a little bit of the concept art for it that you can see, which is basically Snow White and her happily ever after with the castle in the clouds and her prince and all of her little forest friends. So
I'd be happy if I was far away from my significant other. Yeah, she seems she's like, thanks for waking me up. I'm good.
No,
why is she so far away, dude?
I was thinking about that.
Like the way background, she's in the foreground, nowhere near each other. He's holding a hat. There's a white horse. What's going on?
Well, maybe it's because he really wasn't a significant character in the movie because they cut so many of his scenes out. He's so less than 2 minutes totally in the film itself. He's not in it really. He's such an insignificant character with a very significant role at the end. That's pretty much it.
Gentlemen, understand my plight. A insignificant portion of the story.
So because of this intern coming in December 21, 2020, the film's 83rd anniversary, Disney announced that the ride would be renamed Snow White's Enchanted Wish. So I have a little story of how it got its name. How did they decide to do Enchanted Wish? It's obviously not in the film.
La 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 la.
So Dave said, "We've created a much happier ride. So when we looked at Snow White's Scary Adventure didn't make sense anymore. But what was at the heart of Snow White? It was her wish that one day her prince would come, right? It even starts off with the song, I'm Wishing. So we thought, okay, well, what is Snow White about? It's enchantment. It's an enchanting story. So that's how we came up with the idea of Snow White's Enchanted Wish. And it's interesting, he also talked about they planned to make the ride less scary and to balance the 3 core audiences of adults, teens, and kids. So anybody who says that Disney is just for children, that's obviously not true for many, many, many reasons, but they still today don't design only for children. They designed it for all 3 audiences.
I take an opposite approach. I say that Disneyland is not made for kids. It's actually just for adults. So we should probably add like 18 or older to the front gates, I think. Could you imagine?
That would be crazy. The other thing that is unique in Disney history is that a lot of this attraction was actually designed and put together during the pandemic. So everybody did a lot of work from home, shelter in place work for this attraction, which had never been done previously. So this is Kim Irvine working at home.
Look at those color swatches. It makes me feel like I'm at a Lowe's.
Yeah, pretty much. It's like paint swatches.
Yeah.
And so we'll talk a little bit more about the paint and the exterior and whatnot, but I just wanted to show that a lot of the footage and stuff from this that you see is everybody all masked up and whatnot because of the time period in which it was done. Shall we move to the exterior and go over some of the changes that they did for this attraction make it brighter? There's so many things that they did to this, but one of the main ones was updating the color scheme to be more of these kind of like blue, gray, purple, like light tan, pink shades, and they made it specifically to complement the colors of Sleeping Beauty Castle, which it is right next to it. That was a brighter, more cheery color palette overall for it. Do you want to talk about what we see there?
So this is one of the towers, but what I thought was really cool, and I never noticed this when I went, but the birds underneath, and it's all of the Raven, just like the Evil Queen's Raven, which I think is so cool.
But they updated what they're standing on because it used to be skulls, and now
they're standing on little crowns.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know if they just covered the skulls maybe with these little things or what, or they chipped them off and put these on, but they're not standing on skulls anymore. So it's a little mix of like They wanted it to still be suspenseful, so they left in some of the elements, like you still see the evil queen peeking out of the window up above.
I want my bird standing on skulls.
Some of the other things that we do see as well is, you know how I said that there was that like lattice pie on the columns? You would see it looks like pie.
Okay. So time out. I was looking at this. By the way, all of these images are from when Kate was at Disneyland recently. So it's very funny because you can see things were top of mind for when we were talking about them, like what things to look for, right?
Right.
And this one is hysterical because you take this video of the lattice work with the pie, right? And people behind you are like, what is she doing?
Like, I didn't even notice.
You could just see that people are like, what in the world? What's this lady doing? But I love that. It was so, at first when I saw this in the album, I'm like, why did she take a picture of this? But then I was like, oh, the pie.
Yeah, because the original iteration, it was all kind of done in grays, and you didn't really notice the lattice of the pie so much. But now because they painted most of it tan, but the lattice part looks like this pinkish color, it actually really looks like pie. And so when I went through this attraction, when Disneyland opened back up, and I went with my daughter, and she's just like, look, Mom, it looks like pie. And I was like, how come I've never noticed that before? And I think it's because they changed the paint color on it. So
it was awkward because Katie almost got thrown out because she tried to taste it. It didn't taste like pie, but it was...
They still have the squirrels that are on the top of the columns as well. But you know what, Kirk, I found something really cool at D23. They had this shirt that was in the Imagineering Mickey of Glendale's store that was all about
pie lattice. Because if it's not, I don't want to hear about it.
But no, it has all the different columns on the back of this T-shirt, including the squirrels. And so it says, cool. Squirrel order column capital detail at the portico of Snow White's Enchanted Wish queue.
This was a T-shirt?
It's the back, and they have different kinds of columns that they used, but I only took a picture of that one.
If you're listening to this is 1,000% a T-shirt that you might be interested in, but you probably can get it for cheap because everyone else on the planet Earth is like, why would you ever buy that? But we would buy it.
You probably can't get it because it was so exclusive. It was exclusive D23 Mickey's of Glendale merch. So.
Excuse me.
I do want to point out that there's this really beautiful purple flower that is blooming in the queue that looks like this.
Is that real?
It's a real flower. Yeah, that's why there's holes in it. I think some insects got to it. But this purple flower is called the princess flower. Or
why
glory.
Is it called the princess flower?
That's just that's his name. Like that's the name of the plant is the princess flower or glory trees. I didn't look that up. But it is interesting that they use that not only because it's this purple color, which matches, the evil queen, but also that it's the princess flower. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's like a big shrub that's called the princess flower. But they're beautiful. I don't know if they bloom year round, but they're definitely blooming when I went, which was this past month in August. So very beautiful flowers and a nice photo opportunity there near the exit if you are looking for some purple flower photos.
Take your photo in front of a bush.
It's got the building behind it with the evil queen.
Sure it does.
So let's talk signs.
Yeah, so there is a front in front of the queue. It says, over the 7 jeweled hills and beyond the 7th fall, in the cottage of the 7 dwarfs dwells Snow White, fairest of them all, which I love. They updated just a little bit of the coloration. We had talked about this before, and for sure, those dwarfs are going past a lot of hills that had mines and jewels in them. We don't know how many waterfalls there are, but they passed through at least 5 on camera. So just random fun fact.
Yeah, it's always interesting to be on the 7th fall. Like that's never something I've considered that's how they pass by all these waterfalls on their way, So that is an interesting one. And that is if you're looking for where that is on, a lot of people will miss the signs that have the wait times on them. They always have like a little blurb about the ride on the back side of it. And sometimes people miss that. So that's where you can find that.
That's where this is?
Mm-hmm. Because there's another sign too that's just talking about the ride of like what it is. And it says, board a wandering minecart and join Snow White and her friends. With their help, her enchanted wish may come true. So they added that element of suspense in there as well. Will it come true? I don't know. Will you get crushed by a boulder? I don't know. We'll find out.
I hope so. Bring it back. Bring it back. That attraction rocked.
Love it. Once we get to the entrance where it has Snow White's Enchanted Wish, there are some light fixtures as well, which you pointed out last week. Do you remember what they were before, Kirk?
Dude, it was weeks ago. Dude, remind me. What are we talking about? Lights?
It was the light fixtures were like the queen's crown, remember? Yeah, and you said they had a jewel in them. Well, they didn't remove those entirely. They still exist, but they're not where they were before. So this is now a lantern that they've put at the end of the attraction, and it looks like this. So you can usually find it by the cast member that's standing at the exit, but they repurposed them and didn't get rid of it entirely. So I'm really glad that it's still here and didn't disappear.
It's such a good little, I love it.
So that's what we have now is that lanterns.
What is that? What's that going to be, your YouTube thumbnail?
Birds. I don't know, maybe.
That really enhances click-through rate when you just show two lamps. You're like, oh man, I need to see what's in this video. This is our core audience, by the way. Core audience who's listening, I appreciate you, Distorians. And yes, we love lamps.
Yes, we do. But the lamps are now currently ones that just have birds on them. As you'll see in the entire remake of Snow White's Enchanted Wish, that birds are like massively featured, which makes sense for Snow White and her bluebirds and her little forest friends. So the Evil Queen's lamp didn't go away entirely. You can still find it at the exit, but it is they have been removed from the entrance. Now are we ready to talk about the book? You want me to talk about the book? You want to talk about the book?
It's a book. Here, I'll pull it up.
So
go.
Go ahead.
Go. No, you.
No.
No, I'm not talking.
So if you remember
what a book, that's all right, go ahead.
So what used to be here was a golden book with the apple that you would touch and then you would hear the witch's cackle. That has now been replaced by a new door that has some doves on it and forest creatures and flowers and whatnot, and then a storybook that's much like the title frames when we talked about Dorothy Ann Blank and how she made the title frames for the movie of Snow White. This is basically working as the title frames for the attraction. So it's telling the story there. So this says, once upon a time, a kind and lovely princess named Snow White had a wish, but her wish was not meant to be. For the cruel queen, envious of her beauty, commanded she be a humble maid. So I'm telling the story of what we're going to expect as we round the corner. What are you zooming in on there, Kirk?
She's a maid, dude. It's a water bucket and like a little scrub brush.
Yep.
It's literally like, when you think about it, right? You have Snow White, you have the Once Upon a Time, which was so iconic. I mean, that started out so many of their films with an actual physical book that was opening up, which I absolutely loved those as a kid. And then you do get a wishing well, which is leading us back to the origin story of our Enchanted Wish title. And but I just like how they go. She's a humble maid. So
humble maid.
All right, bro. Somebody put a brush on there. It's a bucket.
It's foreshadowing what you're going to see next. Speaking of which, shall we move into what used to be the dungeon?
Scrub-a-dub-dub.
So if you remember, this next part of the queue is with the part that they added in 1983 to warn parents that this ride was going to be very scary. So it was built to be like a dungeon. It had dungeon sounds. It had skeletons. It had griffins. It had a whole bunch of evil, dark, scary things. Obviously, they don't need that anymore because they're not going for scary in this ride anymore. They're going for maybe a little bit suspenseful, but mostly this a beautiful retelling of this story. So they changed it to be Snow White's bedroom. So there's a book there too. Even though it's a little dim in here, that's part. They explain it by saying, banished to a dim chamber for her bedroom, Snow White grew still lovelier every day. As the queen's jealous wrath also grew, Snow White escaped to the wild forest and found refuge with the kindly Seven Dwarfs. So this is supposed to be her bedroom, or at least a piece of her bedroom. There's no bed in here. But do you want to talk about some of the things we find in here, Kirk?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, right? So like remember before or when we were looking in this scene, there was the griffins, there were skulls, there's lots of just like creepy nastiness, right? All of that is gone.
Yeah.
And now we're looking at a table, we're looking at several doves, we're seeing books on shelving, rolling pins, teapot. There is, again, lots and lots of birds are going to be seen in this. There's a plate, tablecloth, looks like some sort of fruit. I don't know what's in that.
I think it's apples. Yeah, when I zoomed in.
They're so tiny though. They're like little baby apples.
They're real. They definitely look like apples when you zoom in. At least most of them do. That one on the one side looks a little dubious, but the rest of them look like apples.
They're like
it's hard to say.
They're like crab apples.
Yeah, crab apples. It could be.
Mm-hmm.
I love the doves are just like chilling in there, but there is a scrub brush in the corner. So this is what was foreshadowed by the book that we saw before. You see there's a bucket and a mop, I think, in it, and then a scrub brush. So That's where that comes from.
Very exciting stuff here, kids.
And you also have Snow White's clothes hanging and aprons and whatnot hanging up in the little alcove here.
I love how people still throw like change and money into this thing. Like there was this shot got me laughing because hang on, let me see if I can zoom this in. There's literally a crumpled up dollar bill on the top of this like box that's closed.
You know, somebody really aimed for that, you know?
I know. Well, they had to crumple up and throw it pretty far to get all the way up there.
Well, and I think it's really interesting too that they chose to put a vanity mirror here with some like a brush and a candle and a little box. So, you know, she had a little sitting area to get herself ready as well. She had her own mirror, which I think is really interesting as well, that they chose to put that in there, just story-wise.
You know, like, think about this for like a hot second. Why on earth would they do that to her when she cares about her appearance, but not to the vanity that her evil queen who's staring at her all the time.
Stepmother. You know what I mean? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think, you know, just a place setting, just to put it in, this is her room. You would naturally have a place to look in the mirror and brush your hair and get yourself ready for the day, even if you're a maid scrubbing the floors of the castle. The only other thing I saw in here is a lantern that looks pretty nondescript as well, that's hanging up in the corner. Nothing too fancy about that.
It's got melted wax on it. It's pretty cool.
Sure.
I like it, dude. They could have had a straight candle, which means it wasn't used. It was so dimly lit that she had to actually ignite it, and it melted because she needs the light.
That's true, because it's a dim chamber. That's right. That's reinforcing that storytelling. Okay, it's fair. And the other thing that's really interesting about this area is the recording that you hear when you walk through is I'm Wishing. And it is the same one that you hear in the wishing well over not too far away on the right side of the castle. If you're facing Sleeping Beauty Castle, there is a Snow White wishing well that goes off every 15 minutes. It starts playing music. The little fish come out of the pond and they start spinning around, and then you hear Snow White singing and then it echoing in the wishing well, which, remember, if we learned a few episodes back that if you hear your echo in the wishing well, it means your wish is going to come true. So you do hear her echo in the wishing well, but that is a recording that they made in 1983 when they were doing this new Fantasyland refurb. They actually had Adriana Caselotti, who was the original voice of Snow White, come back in to do another recording of it so they could have a fresh one for this, the wishing well. Now, this is the same one we are now hearing in the same area of Snow White's Enchanted Wish. But the interesting part was, while they were recording this, Adriana Caselotti was really, really struggled hitting the high notes because she's a lot older than she was in 1937, right? It's been a few years. So she was really having a hard time singing it. And she was getting really worried that they were going to just call it quits and like replace her with somebody else who could maybe mimic or imitate her voice. So she looked up at the sky and she said, "Mr. Disney, if you're up there, please help me find Snow White's voice." And the very next take, she nailed it. And that's what you hear in this cue of Snow White's Enchanted Wish.
That's awesome.
Isn't that a cool story?
That's a good story.
Yeah. So the wishing well goes off. Jim telling us it goes off 24 hours a day. So apparently it doesn't turn off at night. The wishing well just continues to go on all day long, which is really fun. So that I didn't know because I've never been in the park after it's closed. So thank you, Jim, for sharing that in my chat.
I'm wishing for a light bulb. She's got nothing, dude.
No.
That's cool. That's a good story. Who would have known? And that makes perfect sense. Time comes after us all.
It does, sadly. And your voice does change as you get older. But it sounds exactly like Snow White. You would assume that they just pulled it from the movie, but it's not. So heading into the queue area, there's not that many changes here, except that they just updated the light fixtures. So they reflect more birds, just like they did outside, or birds with nests. So just more birds in general for that. And then we get to the load area, where the cars are exactly the same as they were before, that they got in 1970 when they copied the ones that were over in Walt Disney World, and they updated the cars. So those are pretty much the same. And then they just updated the track in 1983. But something that I want to make a little correction. Kate's going to admit that I think she was wrong about something, so buckle up.
Hang on. Dear Diary, today is, what's the date?
It's the 24th.
24th at 9:05 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Go ahead.
I said that it was the chimney that was hiding the supports for the in the load area, which is something that I read in a very reputable, well-sourced book. However, looking at this, I am 100% convinced it's not the chimney. It is actually the trees that are hiding the supports.
There you go.
Because they go all the way up to the ceiling, whereas the chimney does not. So I don't know what that author was thinking when they wrote that, but I'm pretty sure that it's actually the trees that are the supports.
Here first, kids. Trees support us, not chimneys.
But there is still something hiding the supports for the building. It's just trees instead.
Can I admit something, Kate? No one would have known.
I know.
Hey, you know what though? But Kate would have known, so that's important as well.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important that we are accurate, and I want people who listen to this podcast and listen to the content that we make to, I'm not afraid of admitting that I'm wrong when I discover something that is different. So
she is willing to admit she's wrong, so maybe ask her to admit it. Yep. Sorry, that's for me later.
I'm going to go back and read that diary entry later just for funsies.
If it makes you feel better, I didn't write anything. I literally just scribbled. There's nothing there.
It does make me feel better. You talked about the tools last time.
Oh my God. You have no idea how happy this made me when I saw this picture. It's the little things in life, kids. But yeah, the tools are now placed inside of a barrel, and then you have our two-person saw as well on the corner. But I love it. Little pickaxe. Everything is nice and tidied up instead of just laying it on the cottage.
Yeah, it was all strewn about before.
Mm-hmm.
So you also see a lot of new animals in this area. They added butterflies and bluebirds.
I was just trying to pull up the other picture, but yeah, I've got the butterflies here, and then on that thatched roof, they added those bluebirds as well.
There's bluebirds, and there's a little squirrel who's coming out of the tree. None of that existed in the Snow White Scary Adventures version. So they updated all of that. And they also kind of made the colors brighter. They made the lighting brighter. And they just overall made it more cheery, which makes sense for the look that they're trying to go for this attraction as Snow White's Enchanted Wish. And the other thing that they did add also is the animation of Snow White and the dwarfs, as if you're peeking in through the cottage and you can see them dancing in the window. So that's something new that they added as well. Just a fun little feature. And what did you find, Kirk?
Record like 4 seconds. It's not even 4 seconds of the animation. You can see it just a little bit. It was like,
yeah, I wasn't recording that for that clip. I was recording the stump.
You were going for the stump.
I was recording the stump for you.
There's the stump. Oh, it's the, listen, I prefer ride operators to be stumped. So they don't have a clue of what's going on. They're just completely.
So that is something that Kirk has enjoyed in previous episodes, how they transformed the ride operator
just a metal
console.
box before. It's so cool.
It's cool. You know? It is cool. I admit, it's cool. It's true.
Just look at the control panel. I like looking at control panels. I've learned that about myself. One of my favorite control panels, People Mover. Very fun control panel. And you get a really good view of it when you're getting onto that attraction. So, yeah, look at control panels, kids. It's really fun. A bunch of knobs and buttons, and you don't know what they do.
I should write that down. Where's my diary?
What?
Control panels, kids.
Control panels? I guess I'm controlling people. I'm like the least controlling person.
You're a button pusher. Yeah.
Whoever said that wasn't you.
That wasn't me.
Did you come up with that?
No, that was Jim. Full credit goes to Jim in my comments. So
I knew that wasn't Kate. Kate's good, but Jim's better. Nice.
Yeah, I'm not taking credit for that. I can't. That was too good. Okay, let's go on into the Dwarfs Cottage. We got a lot of things to cover here in this version, and I don't think, So, let's head on in. One of the things that they did update before, we had the kettle that was just steaming. Now they've made it so that it is looking like it's going to bubble over. So the actual lid rocks back and forth. So that's a little update that they made there. Somebody tried to tell me that the Dancy Pants that we talked about last week, that the birds are holding was supposed to be, moving more. And I'm like, I don't think that's true. It looks like it's the same amount as it was before.
I stand by that because I think that's true. You want to know why?
Why?
Because if you look at the previous iteration, right, the string is very loose and it sits down lower. I think it's droopier. I think this is a droopy version. I think it's more taut in the new one. Like it's less droopy because this is well over the kettle.
Okay.
I don't know why. I'm not trying to take a stand.
Your pants are droopier in this.
I'm not trying to take a stand on this. But look, like this is the old iteration, well below the kettle. It is above the kettle now. And why do I say that's important? Because it makes the animation of the pants that the birds are holding more lively. Like, look at them jiggle, dude. Okay. I think I made my point.
So then as we move on from the Dancy Pants, they're over at the sink. The hand pump they did change. It used to be just straight black, and then now they've changed it to be brown and tan, and so it looks way more animated. Like you could see the actual face on it.
Here's the original, which is that has that black imagery, and then the new one is like, again, more of that bronzed or wood color. Mm-hmm. It's brownish.
To made it happier,
Yeah, it definitely brightened it up.
So the next thing they changed was the pass-through to the left there. They changed this pass-through. Used to look like a little half shelf, and it used to have a pie on it and a basket of biscuits and whatnot. But they removed this entirely, and they made this a wide open area between the two, most likely to highlight the new positioning of Snow White, which we'll see when we go around the corner. Then they just added a whole bunch of like barrels and bags of random stuff and a crate because they still have the basket of laundry is still there though.
Well, so. there's ready, so it's crate and barrel and a washboard. Right there.
It's the name of a spin-off from Crate and Barrel. So then we go to the corner. Do you want to talk about the pie?
The pie in the corner has changed.
The pie has changed.
The pie changed. So, one thing that I think is kind of interesting is the pie really doesn't have lattice work anymore.
No, you're right.
So I thought that was strange when I saw this because they've spent all that time and attention. And even if you look at this column over here, look, there's lattice work on this column to kind of reaffirm a pie and the column that we saw outside. But the pie itself, which does say Grumpy on top of it, it looks like an old-fashioned apple pie.
Which is the scent that I heard it is, because you do smell apple pie there.
So that's not gooseberry? I always thought it was supposed to be a gooseberry pie.
That's what I thought too, but then when I was doing research, they said the scent is apple. And I was like, why in the world would it be apple? But that would make sense, though, why they made it look that way.
It's an apple pie.
If it's an apple pie. Right.
Well, that's disappointing. Not like I knew what gooseberry smelled like, but I always thought it was that just for iconography.
Continuity.
Story. Right, exactly. Yes. Thank you. Mm-hmm. This is pie talk, kids.
So this is what this area used to look like before they added the pie. And so they really haven't changed it that much, except there's a whole lot more clothes coming out of that drawer. So that bird has been very hard at work throwing things in the drawer since the Snow White Scary Adventure version. Mm-hmm. And then the little shading shelf also, now this is when they add the candle to it. So there's now a candle that is sitting on this shelf as well. On the left-hand side, the shelf that is much too high for any of the dwarves. But they do apparently shave because they just have those chin beards going on.
Yeah, but time out. They did put a chair right in front of it.
Well, there was a chair before,
but it was like look at crooked. The way it was positioned.
That's true.
It's obvious that they're standing on the chair, where before it was too far away.
You know that's interesting.
Sometimes, listen, this may be my one that becomes a K TikTok. The dwarves have I don't even know what you're going to say about a chair positioning, but you can make a video out of it.
I'm 100% going to make that for sure. Okay. So moving on, they did move the little basket of rolls, though. If you're disappointed, the basket of rolls is gone from the pass-through. If this is something that has bothered you with Snow White's Enchanted Wish, be bothered no more, because on the little shelf that is to the right of the dresser, there is actually the little basket of rolls is sitting up there on the shelf. So you don't have to be concerned. It's sitting up there now. And I'm trying to remember if they had that shelf before in that location, but I wasn't able to find that. So, and they also have like a small tin or like a lunch tin or a thermos or something like that's sitting next to it as well.
Hang on. That did not exist, right? So here's the pillar, and then here is what it looked like before.
So they added a shelf to put the rolls on.
Yeah.
It's a roll shelf.
It's a bread shelf.
Bread shelf.
There you go.
But it's fun to me that they decided they didn't want to get rid of that because it was the prop that had been around a long time. So to me, it was almost like them honoring the legacy of the attraction by not getting rid of that prop entirely and finding a new home for it. So I think that's fun. Do you want to talk about Snow White? What happened to her?
Well, Snow White was originally on this staircase. So we would see her like creeping up there, but now she is dancing, dude. She's having a blasty over with the dwarves in that pass-through area. So she's having a ball. And you can look at her positioning is completely different. Obviously, one, she's walking up that staircase with that amazing, awesome candlestick that we talked about before. And then in this one, the new updated, she is like holding out her dress and she's got her hand up and she is dancing with, who's the one below her? Which dwarf is that? I mean, Dopey's on the top.
Sneezy? Is that Sneezy? No. Yes? Sneezy. I think it's Sneezy. Right? So, interesting thing about this is that they made her just a very simple animation. Yeah. She's just turning. She's not like moving her arms around. She's not, they could have made her like the new Tiana, animatronics and whatnot. They had the technology to do that, but they chose not to because they wanted to honor the attraction as it was and make her kind of blend seamlessly into it as if she had always been there.
It wouldn't make sense if they were going to keep the dwarves, which they did exactly the same, right? Then it would seem out of place if she's this technological wonder and they're more static with limited movement,
Yeah. Well, and I think that this thing does bother me, though. I like the fact that she's dancing with them, and I think that's really fun, especially with the foreshadowing shadow that we see outside. I am frustrated, though, that this ride track was staged so that you'd see her as you go around the turn, and now all we see on the stairs is a couple of barrels and the animals going up the stairs. So anytime they do this, like they changed, remember, the Haunted Mansion, the reason we turn in the attic was because we were supposed to see the beating heart bride and get scared and then run towards the window. But then when they changed the location of those characters, the track no longer makes sense why we would turn there. And so this to me feels a little bit frustrating that way, in that I don't think she's staged in a good spot because you don't see her well.
Because when you're turning, you're staring at an empty staircase.
Right.
I mean, it's not empty. It does have the turtle, at least.
So, I mean, they can't get rid of the staircase because it adds to, like, that's the layout of the cottage. But, like, having her, and it wouldn't make sense to have her, like, across the room from them dancing would be weird. So I get why they put her over there, but for staging purposes, we'd have to look to the right really quickly to see her, which I think is why they removed the pass-through, to try to give us more of an opportunity to see her. But,
well, you know, it reminds me of, like, going back to the Haunted Mansion. It reminds me of when you're doing the load for the Haunted Mansion, because of that conveyor belt, they want guests to be able to see it before they actually go and do the load, because it's a different style. So same thing here, where if you had that, do you have that original photo that you have of the just the cut through, but not the pass through?
Yes.
With the shelf on there?
Yeah.
Because if you look at that viewing angle, you would not see Snow White. Right? Like Snow White wouldn't even be there, and you couldn't get a glimpse. So as a result, I feel like that was necessary because of the way, unless they would have changed how the track layout was in terms of its turn, but they elected not to do that.
Right. So it is what it is. I think it's staged poorly, but I do like the change that they made. I think that it's fun to have her dancing, and I think that the way that they made her is beautiful. I just don't like how it's staged because of the way you see it, but personal opinion.
Think, you know, I mean, here's the thing about this entire attraction, right, is like, staging or not, it's so quick. It's 2 minutes and 30 seconds. You are banging down scenes very fast. But the good thing is the line is usually short enough where if you wanted to go on it multiple times, which I have done plenty, it's so great to, like, pull in all those little details. But your first shot, you'll see her, but you won't be able to fully absorb everything that's going, because you have to purposely look away from the focal point that the ride vehicle is placing you in.
Yeah. I do have a question from Lissy over here asking, how do we know all these details? How do we see them? And the thing is, A, I go on it a lot, but B, we also watch POVs. We go look at photos, and we analyze in that way, because then you can actually pause it and look at all the things, which you would miss if you're on the ride. It goes by way too fast.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, right, is we love this stuff, and we look at it with a different lens sometimes, you know, because we're trying to pull out little things, right? So, like, right now we're doing a straight comparison and contrast to the previous attraction. So when you sit there and stare at POVs, like, I have to do it because I don't know Disneyland's attraction as well, because I've only been on it maybe 6 times total. So as a result, like, I can pick these out though, because I remember what the old one looked like. So it's just like, I think a part of it is it's like a detective. You're a theme park detective, and you're trying to find clues to tell an interesting story. So, and then we make weird connections as well, because that's just how your brain works, of looking at a column with lattice work, then looking into a wooden structure with lattice work that's also next to the pie, which happened to have changed the pie type. Like, do you see how, like, this all is layering and stacking on each other? But it's not necessarily intuitive. But a good way to practice, obviously you guys are listening to us, but a good way to practice is ride an attraction multiple times. Ride it through 2, 3, 4 times
in a row,
and force yourself to look on opposite sides of what you naturally look at. That's one of my favorite practices, to find hidden fun details, because if they're forcing me to look left because of a ride vehicle turn or whatever, I'm looking right to see if there's something that's missed, because there's always stuff that's in those blind corners or angles or little details. Or even if there isn't, it's interesting that they decided not to decorate something because they figured that they had your gaze in another area. So, like, I think that's a good practice if you really like theme parks and rides and attractions, and you really want to pay homage to anybody who creates these things. It's a pretty cool practice to do.
Yeah, just be safe when you do it. Make sure that you're not leaning out of the vehicles or sitting backwards on a ride where you're not supposed to be backwards, just for safety tips.
Sit in the ride vehicles upside down with your legs sticking out, and then you can look at the ground the entire time. A lot easier is what I think.
Yeah, that sounds like a safe option. All right, are we ready to get out of the cottage? Should we move on?
Yeah, cottage talk. We're doing cottage talk.
So we're going outside of the cottage.
We're leaving the cottage.
And the evil queen is still peering through the window, so she hasn't changed. She's still hanging out there, and the mural of the log is exactly the same as it was before. So we don't really need to talk about that. But the major change is the shadows of the dwarves walking home from the mine.
Did they redo this one as well? Because when they did Seven Dwarfs Mine Train, they literally retraced frame by frame so that they could do the projection. Did they do the same thing for this one?
Yes. So it's using the same thing from the film. They use the shadows and they use the animation from the film and then put it in the attraction. Yeah, so they didn't remake it new. It is from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs from 1937 because they wanted, again, because it was, the anniversary of the film as well. They wanted to honor it that way. So I actually have this really fun one. This him from working at home, creating this scene at home, which is pretty neat with the log and the dwarves.
They literally had to take these things and then reanimate it to fit it into that space. But it's hand tracing of the exact same thing. Which I wonder while he's at home doing these spot by spot, frame by frame, if he got annoyed by Dopey's hitch step.
Oh, I have a story for you about Dopey's hitch step.
Well, we talked about one before about animators being upset because it was a good gag.
Can I tell you where it came from? Did I tell you that yet?
I think we did, but tell it again.
I haven't told it yet. Okay. So
we're all ears.
Okay. So this comes from Seamus Culhane, who is an animator for Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. So regarding Dopey's out-of-stepness, he said, I got my version of it from a Laurel and Hardy feature movie. Laurel and Hardy, in India, it's called Bonnie Scotland. So it's from this one. So in case you want to look it up, you can actually see them marching and see Dopey's gait. So they had this marvelous sequence where Hardy was like a top sergeant or something. So he was walking outside of the group. I don't know how they did it or who they used, but literally they had thousands of people in a long shot, all marching in uniform, with rifles and packs and stuff, winding down a mountainside way out of sight. It seems Hardy thought Laurel was out of step, so he made him get in step, and he hopped and he skipped and he jumped. And when he did, he made everyone else hop and skip all the way down there as far as you could see. So that is where Dopey's hitch step comes from. It's from Laurel and Hardy, Bonnie, Scotland.
That's awesome. I never knew that. We did not know that. This is new.
Yeah,
breaking news.
New information.
Did you look up the film to try to find a clip of the hitch step?
I do have a clip of it. I just don't know if I can show it here.
No,
but
yes. All good. Yeah. Good. Oh, that's so fun.
I did find a clip of it. And
does it look a lot like Dopey's or no?
It does. Yeah. Okay. You can definitely tell where they pulled it from, which is really fun. And I do love on this poster, too, it does say 60 minutes of joy. So in case you need 60 minutes of joy, exactly, you can watch Bonnie Scotland.
Watch it. It's probably a great film.
So I have a little note about the digital projection they use here from Dave. So he says, some of the digital projection we actually went back to the movie and rotoscoped out what we wanted and digitally mapped that in the room. So the projection is part of the original movie rather than going into a computer and CGIing the work, so it doesn't feel like that fits anymore. It would feel like it's a different art form. So they wanted to blend them really seamlessly from what happened in 1937. So he says, so we were able to blend three-dimensional painted sets and three-dimensional sculpted characters now with projected imagery that was all artistically in the same family. So they were very, very sensitive to the fact that they had all these sculpted figures from, the 1980s, and then they had these 1930s animation, and they had these sets, and like, how do we make this all blend? And I think they did a really beautiful job with it because it all seems to make sense when you see it.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. And it looks good. I don't know. People complain a lot about the use of screens, but there's something magical about using the original in the attraction. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So, it's like, this is where this came from. Right.
And again, it blends real practical with projection. That's what makes it nice. If it's a straight screen, I get it. You don't want to see here. I'm going to go a little bit further so we can get something that's really close. So I understand if you don't want to have a straight screen. That makes sense. Like, nobody wants to see a screen. But if it's well camouflaged amongst 3D artifacts, I think it can be really beautiful and make sense in the context of the story you're telling.
Yeah, I agree. And I think this is a great example of that.
Yeah, 100%. It's really, really classy. Stay classy, kids.
So they do have here, instead of the castle at sunset, then they have the Seven Dwarfs marching across the log on what may be walking past the seventh fall, perhaps, because there's a waterfall there.
Seventh fall. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Look, here's a couple of the jeweled hills.
There you go. So, all right. Do you have anything else for this area, or should we move on?
Moving right along.
So let's go into the Dwarfs Mine, which
in a mine.
Oh, I forgot to mention, they do sing Hi Ho right up before this, and that had never been in this attraction before. So that's the first time we ever heard that song. Right.
That's cool.
So let's talk about the mine. So Dave said we wanted folks to understand what the dwarves did. In the old attraction, we had the dwarves dancing in the cottage and playing music, and then it was all about the queen. And then you entered what looked like an abandoned mine where everybody had left years ago. So what is the mine about again? We can't assume that every guest riding knows the story. We have to tell the story. So they basically just brought this mine back to life and showed the dwarves actually doing things in the mine, which I love.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks great. It's awesome. And then I love how Dopey is sitting in all the gems, but the mine car is straight up Seven Dwarfs mine.
Yeah.
It's so good. And the practical effect of his eyes too with the gems is great.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like he has all the eyes reflected in the diamonds. So I have a few notes on Dopey. He said, we decided not to do anything with projection heads. You remember in Frozen and things like that.
Yeah.
But he said that didn't feel right for this attraction. That technology felt like, again, we were taking the art form out of the tradition of Snow White. So that's why they specifically did these 3D sculpted figures here, even though they could do projection faces and whatnot. They chose not to out of respect for the history of Snow White, which I think is lovely. I do have a note about Dopey. Why does Dopey have no voice? This is something I found from an interview with sound man Bob Cook, who worked on the original Snow White film. He said, at first they were trying to find a voice for Dopey, and it just seemed like nothing would fit the character. Finally, somebody said, maybe we could make him funny without a voice. I think it was Wilfred Jackson, the cartoon director. I remember that Jackson acted out the parts of Dopey. So they were going to give him a voice, but nothing just fit the bill. So they're like, let's just make him funny and not make him talk. And that's why Dopey doesn't talk.
And he's more of a slapstick character that they animated him into.
He is, yeah. And so Dopey also has kind of a pickaxe behind him and a ladder and some buckets of diamonds. But that's pretty much all that's in this area. I do have some concept art for this area, though, which you could just see lots of diamonds sparkling everywhere.
It's actually, you know what? I mean, I know it's not showing the mine shaft timber supports, but that concept art is actually relatively close to what finalized here.
It's true. They also had new lighting effects for the diamonds, new enhanced audio, tinkling sounds, right, for the diamonds, which we talked about last time. And Dave said it actually feels like an active mine now. You get to see the dwarves, you get to see crystals that look like they're embedded in rocks versus crystals that are glued on with hot glue under flats, which unfortunately is what it sort of looked like in our old ride. So he's like, let's make the diamonds look more realistic, essentially, is what they did here. And I think they did a good job with it.
Can I talk about something that bothers me?
Yeah, go for it.
Why are all the gems cut while they're still in the rocks?
That's fair.
It's a weird one, but I was staring at it and I couldn't get it out of my head that all of the gems are perfectly brilliant and gorgeous.
I think I have a picture. No. Yeah, I don't know.
Because they should just be raw gems in the mine, and then if they want to fix them, and make them nice, they could.
That's a good picture. It's like the movie, though. They're like that in the movie as well. Because they're sorting them, so... Bring it up with Walt Disney. There's on the right hand side, we do have some sticking Tommies, which is one of my favorite things in this attraction is the sticking Tommies that you see up on the right hand side, which we talked about in our Big Thunder Mountain series, which essentially was something miners would use. And they have a hook on one side and then just a loop that they could stick a candle in, and then a point on the other side to just jam it in the rocks or the timbers or whatever. And so with the hook, you could actually hang it on your hat, your mining hat as well. So that's what Sticking Tommies are. And we're very excited to see them here because they're also in Big Thunder Mountain, and that makes us happy. So
yeah, there's not a lot of there's attractions that should have them and they don't have them. So it's really exciting when you actually see it. Can I get a little geeky?
Yeah.
So I then looked up the history of when did people start cutting gems.
Okay.
So it's called lapidary is the work of grinding and polishing, and they actually started cutting gems all the way in 3000 BC, which I think is crazy. Like, I'm like, oh my God. So like Egyptians and Mesopotamia were doing it. And really, honestly, theirs is a lot more rudimentary than what we have now. But I did find some, this is just kind of cool. I like living history stuff. And I actually did a huge paper on Egyptology. I had an Egyptology class in college. It was awesome. So they used lots of turquoise in Egyptian jewelry, but like this was the first time that you actually saw people taking anything that was from the earth and polishing it. They used to build lots of amulets, which is also strange because like you think like what on earth is an amulet? But they thought that, you know, things like emeralds and turquoise and gold and copper all had these magical properties attached to them as well, which I thought was kind of cool. And then I found out that after them, which again, Egyptians kind of rudimentary, the next group are the Indians. So in India, they started, I want to get my dates right. In 1500 BC, there was an ancient Indian text that was called the Arathstratra, which actually said in 300 BCE specific cutting techniques that were allowed and not allowed. And it was like more of like a taxation thing in this ancient text. But it said the king shall take possession of mines of precious stones of gold and silver, talking about if there are any kind of issues in part of their sixfold trade commerce. Which I thought was like crazy that like this existed like so long ago. We didn't get to like what the gems look like here in the mine though until the brilliant cut came into the 18th. Anywhere it's like 1470 is when they started doing faceting techniques, which carved. That's actually a great picture. Leave that up. I love this. Okay. This is so lame. I don't care. I really am a big fan of all of this right now. So if you've ever bought a diamond, there are different cuts and shapes. And this is awesome because they actually give pictures and time frames of the different cuts. So back in the 1300s, this was the first faceted cut. And this was in the 1300s. It was called the point cut. Then in the 1400s, we got a table cut. Now, that's not what Doc is holding. We'll get to that in a second. 1475, you get a pear cut. Then you get the Rosetta cut in 1475, a brilliant cut, which is more what we're looking at here in 1650. Then they have the old European cut in, what was that date? 1830s, 1902, the Asher cut. The round brilliant cut, which almost everybody knows from engagement rings, wasn't established until 1919. So
yeah, that's pretty late.
It's right, but it makes sense. This is why I did this, okay? I know this is crazy, but I needed to know if that style of cut would have been around in the 1800s Germany. So that's where I went to figure this out, and they talk about it specifically in 1681 in Venetian were doubling facets from 17 to 33 to create an overall more brilliant diamond. So this would have totally been a normal thing to do fashion, famous cushion style cuts with rounded edges and gems. There you go. You didn't want to know. I'm sorry.
So it's legit.
It's legit. It's fine.
It's legit.
Everything here is fine, except for the fact that they're not uncut gems. They should be uncut in the, but you know, other than that, we're good. We're good.
Yes. Interesting. Okay.
By the way, I cut all of my gem talk down a lot. I just want everybody to realize I could afford.
Which cut did you use?
Dude, the first cut, the point cuts, the deepest.
Cut right to the point. Oh. So there is a couple other things that they added to this area as well. So they have the shadow.
Jim goes, another reason to thank the Venetians. Oh, dude, just nailing them today. That is good.
They did add this kind of shadow projection, but I feel like this is where they also either have projection mapping or lasers or something, because the sparks actually look like they're flying. So it's not just like a shadow. They have these little like sparks that look like they're flying from him, chipping away at the rock with a pickaxe on the right-hand side. So you'll see that. And then on the left side, there's what looks like almost like an endless shaft, mine shaft with like mirrors that you'd see that kind of goes off into the distance forever. Which to me reminds me so much of the endless, corridor in the Haunted Mansion, with the candelabra. That kind of idea, that concept with using mirrors to make things look like they're... Do you know what I'm talking about, Kirk? Have you seen this?
No one knows what you're talking about. No, okay. I know exactly what you're talking about, dude. Yeah, of course. But this looked like this. I mean, this is a repurposed effect that they already had in the ride. They just improved it by having Doc and all the gems lit up.
That doesn't look that's not what I'm talking about.
Okay, which part are you talking? Is it after this?
It's before that. It's on the left-hand side.
It's over here. This thing?
It's before that.
What?
And I'm trying to pull it up. Hold on just a second. I have
Where are you in this mind, lady?
Yeah, it's when nobody looks that way.
Oh my God, dude. Even in this POV, they completely skip it. Remember I told you
right. That's what I said. You got to look here.
It's straight up like it's on this side. They're not even looking over there.
This is what it looks like. Yeah. Watch. We're going to go around the corner and see. I'm looking to the left, and you look by, and you'll see there's like an endless mine.
Cool. That is cool.
Which is a play off of the murals that they used to have there. That are meant to look like forced perspective going off in the distance, which they still have there, and they've put things in front of them, but they instead took that to the next level by using mirrors to make it look like it goes way far into the distance with a track and a whole bunch of diamonds and whatnot. So look to the left.
It's crazy to me how effective mirrors are. They use them all the time.
Yes.
Hey, kids, here's 2 places in Disney attractions they use mirrors. One old and one new. Figment, when you go and you see the butterfly and the butterfly's moving and then suddenly it's gone, mirror. And then number 2...
Spoiler alert.
What? I'm not... Get over it, dude. We're spoiled. Like milk, bro. We're going...
Sorry.
Great. No, you're good. Here's the real one that people really don't want to hear. Cosmic Rewind. How do you think they make the cosmic generator disappear? Think about that for a
Well, the giant guy reaches in and pulls it out.
I think that's the technical Marvel term, is giant guy. Which is funny because that's what I would call him. Because like I have no idea. I know he's like a guardian or somebody. I don't know what he is. Elemental god dude.
Back into the mine we go, because there's a few other things here we have to mention before we leave this mine. One is that forced perspective mural, which we talked about, that was in the old version. Well, they kept that, and here's the concept art for it, for Doc holding up the diamonds and sorting them. But they put Doc in front of it holding up a large red diamond. And I have something from Dave. He says, we were able to bring back a sculptor named Teresa Miller, who had retired years ago. I think she'd been with the company almost 40 years. We were able to bring her back to do some of our dwarves and animals. She's an on-model sculptor and did them exactly like the movie, which was phenomenal. So that's why I think that's why this attraction looks so old school, in a lot of ways, is because they actually brought back the artists that made a lot of these things for the parks for years and years and years.
It's so cool. There's something about the hand craftsmanship of doing things in a low-tech way. I'm sure they used advanced processes or resins or whatever. I get that. But I think that's why I probably like this attraction so much, is they seamlessly added new tech to old. But it's not like... It doesn't feel cheesy, or it doesn't feel too advanced, would be a good way to put it.
Right. Just like when they use practical effects over digital ones, There's something to it that feels very tangible, and it just makes it feel more real to us, because we don't live in well, we live in a digital world in some ways, but, we live in a tangible world.
Meanwhile, wait, where are we running this podcast? Oh, geez, what are you talking about?
So, I think I agree. I think that anytime that they can go back and use the original artists, they can use sculptors, they can use, practical effects, and integrating them well. I think this attraction is such a great one for showing how you can integrate both the classical art and sculpture and techniques with the newer ones in a way that's respectful to both, and makes sense for both. So I feel like at this point, this is a good place for us to pause because there's so many more interesting, fascinating things they changed in this attraction from the original that I think that this is a good place to pause and then do another part next week so that we can really dig deep into the stories.
Listen, I think this is the perfect time to stop because we have so much more we have to dive into, and it's just not fair if we rush the ending. Because guess what? In the original attraction, they rushed the ending. So let's not be that.
That's right. Now that it's Enchanted Wish, we should probably take our time and tell the story right as well. So that's great. So we have some amazing stories coming up next week and some really incredible details and backstories of some of the things we're going to see. And of course, comparing and contrasting Snow White's Scary Adventures with Snow White's Enchanted Wish. But for now, I think this is where we end this episode. And Kirk, do you have any final thoughts here as we wrap up?
A taut laundry line will make for jingly pants. And if you have a bread basket, build a shelf for it.
Build a shelf. Don't dump out your bread. Don't get rid of it. Just build a shelf for your old bread. Old bread's valuable too. Life lessons. Well, thank you everybody for joining us for this episode of Distory. We hope you enjoyed digging into the comparison of Snow White's Scary Adventures and Snow White's Enchanted Wish, and we'll continue the rest of this attraction next time on Distory. Thanks everybody for being with us.